movie. I saw it last night. Yeah, I'm not going to talk any more about it because I don't want to spoil it. It's one of those movies that actually isn't as smart as it wants to be, but it's horror, so it's okay. There's a lot of intentional humor in it too, but they're all horrible things, and you'll feel bad for laughing at it. But one thing to let everyone know, this is Video Game Makers Unite, something that Gordon Walton and I have been doing for the past year and a half now. We started this year doing it every other month, so in case you're worried about in June, we didn't have a show, so you didn't miss anything. We'll be doing this again in September and then again in November, and we'll be announcing speakers as we go. And we are going to announce a speaker who is here. I wanted to give credit to our sponsor because we actually had one this time, but neither of the representatives are here. But I wanted to give a shout out to Richard Mady and Dan Dunham of Electric Hat Games, makers of To the Top for VR. And they were nice enough to pay for the pizza and beer, which Gordon has to do by himself most of the time. So we are appreciative to them. So one big hand for Electric Hat Games. Yay. Hopefully that they come here to help us eat the pizza, because otherwise we'd have to take it all home. We actually got a lot of it. But this is what 49 people signed up looks like. I fully expect there to be people coming in late because not everyone knows downtown or lives anywhere near it. Plus we have all this construction, which kind of throws people off. So please be aware of that, and that's also why all the tables have moved off to the side. Not that I wanted to deprive you of a place to put your beer down, but that gives you a little more space to move around, and there'll probably be some late people coming in. But before I announce the speaker, also I've been looking at all the reasons when you sign up on Meetup. We have those little questions that you answer about what matters to you and what you're hoping to learn from stuff. A lot of you seem to be really interested in like learning about anything, like finding the ground zero, finding your first step. Like maybe you just came to town, or maybe you're looking for your first job or whatever. Here's the thing to know. There's a lot of stuff going on in Austin. Any given week, there's at least 3 different events going on at any given time. You don't have to go to them all, but it helps if you're aware that they exist and you can choose. I mean, you live in Austin. Part of the challenge of living here is deciding what among the many things there are to do at any given night you choose to do, and staying home is always an option. But everything that you learn how to do, that's important, but it's also important that someone knows you and can vouch for you and can say that is an actual decent human being that you can work with. And if for some of you that may take practice to convey. I'm not saying this as any judgment on your character, just to say that some people are awkward, some people are shy, including me. I'm not as good at this as I would like to. I've just had practice. And no one got good at anything without practice. Human interaction is a thing. So I encourage you to look up stuff that's going on a regular basis. If you can read all this stuff, that's just stuff that I'm off the top of my head that I know is going on. There'll be plenty of time to look it up later and ask questions. But one thing that we like to do, since this is Capital Factory, and oh, by the way, Capital Factory is letting us use the space, so maybe one big hand for Capital Factory. Thank you. They like it when I give them a shout out. They're right across the hall. And by the way, if you parked in the garage parking, you will want to leave here with a slip that you can get from the front desk out here, so you can leave for $7 as opposed to $36. Maybe you parked in the street and it doesn't apply to you, but anyway, some of you may have been parking in the garage. You will want to get a slip that you will use as the second thing after you scan out the thing you get when you first park there. You'll figure it out. But one thing that we like to do is talk about the job haves and the job have-nots. If you are looking for a job, be prepared to talk about, give your name, give your aspirations, and do you have business cards? And we'll start on this side of the room. Who is looking for a job? Okay.
I'm looking for a job. I just graduated about 6-7 months ago.
What's your name?
Michael Lazell.
Lazell.
I'm a game designer / level designer.
Very good. Do you have business cards?
I don't have business cards yet.
You need to get business cards.
Yes,
They're
I
cheap.
do.
Yes. Now you know.
I do.
Anyone else? Stand up.
My name is Lane Lewis. I just moved to Austin, Texas 4 or 5 months ago, and I've worked one job, which was a QA job, super simple at Twisted Pixel, and I'm looking
Sure.
different roads, but no business cards. Didn't think about that. So
Yeah.
consider that.
You'll know better next time. And actually, Twisted Pixel, shout out to them, because they just shipped their latest VR game, Defector, Spy Caper in VR. So that's available in the Oculus Store as of today. Stand up.
Hey, my name's Mark Price. Kind of looking for a project more so. I moved to Austin, Texas, California recently. Engineer, software engineer for developer for about 12 years. Specifically looking to do something with Unreal Engine, C++, and that's all.
Is that what you specialized in before?
No, actually,
Okay.
Unity, other languages, and so I've been doing Unreal for about a year now, hobbyist, and I want to build something with a team with it now, project, job, whatever.
Yes. Very good. Welcome. All right, side of the room. Let's start at the front and we'll go to the back. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, I'm Mariah Leader. I just moved to Austin about 2 months ago. I'm originally from Montana, but I just got my master's degree in Scotland, so reintegrating back into the country. My expertise is in human rights and international politics, so my interest is actually trying to integrate issues of like human rights issues into video games and like video game culture. I think that's a really important thing. So, for example, issues of representation are really interesting to me. I have 10 years of experience doing event management for a pop cultural convention. Some of you I already talked to you about that. And I'm looking to break in for my first actual video game role, looking in either events, maybe production line, because I think that my skills can transfer pretty well into that, or QA.
So I understand OkashiCon is happening next weekend in Pflugerville.
Oh,
So it's an anime convention, but at least it's sort of well-run. Anyway, anyone else looking for work on this side of the room?
Hi, I'm Carly. I've been a Unity developer for about 3.5 years and doing it professionally for about 9 months through freelancing. But I'm looking for a full-time job in town to like work with a team and really grow my skill set. So I also have business cards if anyone wants to hit me out.
Very good. Good for you. Making our way back. Anyone in that row?
I
Yes,
don't know
please.
if I should introduce myself here because I just joined UT 2 weeks ago. I'm graduating next year, so I am looking for a job down the line. So I want people to remember me. My name is Sija.
Could you say that one more time?
My name is Sija.
CJ.
Yeah.
Right on.
Most people call me CJ.
Right on.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm studying Master of Science in marketing. So they mostly do teach you like data visualization and behavioral science, that kind of stuff. So my background was actually in biotech, but I've been working in like consumer packaged goods, social media stuff. So I'm really surprised. 2 weeks in Boston, I found this event. I'm really excited.
Well, we're glad to have it for
Happy to be
you.
here.
Yeah, this, like I said, our speaker earlier, this is a perennial subject that a lot of people care about, but she's actually done it for quite a long time, so she knows what she's talking about. Now we'll go to the job have-nots. Who is looking to hire? This side of the room. We don't always get that, that's okay. How about this side of the room? Anyone looking to hire?
So, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Renee Wooten. I'm an associate producer at Kinsale Entertainment. We don't have any QA right now. We were looking, but keep an eye on for that because we have multiple projects running. And we are looking for a Java software engineer.
I think we have a senior and a junior.
A senior and a junior, yes. So.
Right on. Okay.
My name is Shawan. I am currently in the process of starting up my own publishing company. It's going to be a lot of different, kind of against the grain. I obviously don't want to say too much so you don't steal it, but we're basically looking for the whole thing: product managers, product owners, developers, just a little bit of everything. So if you're interested in kind of a ground level project to work up, talk after this.
Right on. Anyone else? Gordon?
I've got an opening for a VFX artist, video FX, and a senior server guy.
Right on.
I know somebody senior server.
There may be some people around that maybe haven't worked in games, but, you know, transferable skills. All right. Well, like I said, there are probably going to be some more people coming in as we go, so just be aware of that and don't make them feel too small when they come through the door. But please avail yourself of food and drink while you're here, and we will have a break at some point later in the speech, but I'll introduce our speaker. for this evening. And again, all the things you could be doing on a Thursday night, you've come to listen to her. No pressure. But again, I'll let her introduce herself, but I'll answer her name, Debbie C. Wolfkale.
All right, thanks. All right, so I'm gonna be a little bit trapped back here hitting slides, but I'm glad to be here. I really appreciate everybody coming down tonight. I've come to a few things down here at the Capitol Factory myself, and I've been pleasantly surprised at how great and informative and relevant they all were. So I have to live up to that expectation for you guys tonight. I think hopefully this hits some of the areas of interest that you have. It's very directed towards gaming, but I think a lot of things that I'll talk about are relevant across the board in a variety of different service-oriented companies where you're looking to acquire customers and retain them for a long time and continue to get revenue from them. If anybody doesn't want to work in a business where you're getting customers and making money from them, then you probably will not want to be in this room for this presentation. With that being said, again, my name's Debbie Sue Wolfkale. I know we're gonna stop and take questions at some point along the way, but also if you wanna throw stuff out, just do it. And currently I'm VP of Marketing for Artcraft Entertainment. All right, let's see. So most people start with, hey, here's my career, here's my bio, this is what I've done all my life. And usually when they do that, I go, okay, let's get comfortable in the chair, think about what I didn't get done today at work that I need to do tomorrow, and I kind of zone out. So you're gonna find out that engagement is the key to all good things in life. So we're gonna start that principle right here and now. I wanted to start with 2 truths and a lie. So there are 2 truths and a lie up on the slide right there, and I'll give you a minute to look them over. And then I'll see if anybody wants to take a stab at what's what.
Those are pretty nerdy things. Huh?
That probably says more about my life than I really wanted to reveal, but we're all friends, right? Yep.
I'll take a stab at it. I'm gonna say you were Mickey Mouse is a lie.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna hear them all out, and then I'll tell you which one is a lie.
I was gonna say that, so I'll say truth, lie instead.
So you're saying the New York one is a lie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same.
New York?
The chances are,
Okay.
I'll fill the gap. Mark Hamill.
Okay.
first bullet.
It's worth a shot.
I'll also go Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse?
I go with them and the ham, because your Twitter says you're a big comic book nerd.
That's not a lie. All right, any other guesses? We've kind of hit everything.
Trick question, they're all true.
They're all true. Hey, I like the way you think, so keep them guessing. Anyone else have any crazy logic about what's true and what's not true there?
I'm gonna say the New York City one just because I wouldn't expect to see Robin Williams at a comic book store or Uptown Comics.
Although
So-
he is a huge
Yes, he is.
comic book nerd.
Well, then
Name
that's
his daughter Zelda.
He is a very big comic book nerd.
What?
And you probably would expect to see him there, but I did not. So that is my lie. And yes, I did spend a day with Mark Hamill, and yes, it was probably the best day of my entire life. And he is a comic book nerd from a very young age, and told me he used to get like the penny comics and the old books and all this kind of stuff. And he went on, of course, you know, not only to be in Star Wars, but he was also the voice of the Joker in a lot of video games, which is how I came into contact with him.
What was it that he was working on at the time?
He was voicing a cinematic trailer and the game that I was working on, DC Universe Online. But that was supposed to be the last game that he would do using his voice to voice Joker, because he said that it really bothered him the way the Joker treated Harley. And it was a very gnarly thing for him to deal with over time, and he'd been doing it for a while, but he did go on to do one more version of Arkham Asylum, the series, the video game. So, he was a very nice guy to hang around with, and again, comics, who knew? All right, so that is kind of fun to do at the beginning. And now let's talk about what we're really here about. So today, I got asked to talk about marketing, and I was thinking about marketing a lot because that's what I do every day, and that's what I've been doing for a while. I kind of fell into it, but it's something that I'm super passionate about. And I'm passionate about it because I do a very unique style of marketing that's a little different than most people do, even in my own business, because I work on live service games, and live service games are a little bit different than most regular marketing jobs, because you're not only marketing a product, but people are using the product at the same time, so it's sales and service pulled together. I'm gonna use a little bit of comic book imagery in my presentation, so forgive me, but our players don't have the ability to use the bat signal when they need help, or when they need information, or when they're in trouble in our games. And we can't leap tall buildings in a single bound for them either, but we can propel our brand success. We have that capability. We can't be aware of every injustice as it's happening in games or in products when we're using them, but we can guard against the evils of robbing players of a chance at success by arming them up front with superhero style journeys. And I think that's a big opportunity and focus for most companies, including video game companies. It's odd, but I have worked exclusively with video games that had an online component, that were massively multiplayer online games. I've worked on some games that were not, but I've worked on some Mass Effect games, I've worked on a couple things like that, but even the Mass Effect games I worked on, each one of those games also had a multiplayer online component. So interestingly enough, I jumped into the business, I guess, right at an interesting moment in time. Over the past 5 years, our business has completely transitioned, almost completely transitioned, from a focus on retail, a retail model where we would develop games and put them in the box and then put them on a shelf at a retailer's store or perhaps online. And now our focus has shifted. Now we're looking at developing experiences that are online, that are developed for multiple players to be in together, and a game design that drives recurring revenue. I think that's awesome because every day is crazy, and every day is interesting, and every day is challenging, and every day we're fighting to get that customer to come back and play our game tomorrow. And that's what it's all about. Today, I'm going to share 3 emerging trends. Let's see. These are some of the games I've worked on, by the way. Today, I'm going to share some emerging trends, in fact, 3. 3 trends emerging in live service landscape that I believe integration of these trends into your business will help you get your brand delivering at heroic proportions. All right, so I know you're anxiously awaiting trend number 1. Here we go. Those are live service games. These are some of the live service games that we see growing in the business as this business has transitioned. All right, emerging trends. The role of marketing in contemporary consumer products is changing dramatically. It used to be that companies didn't think about or really talk to marketing until they knew what the product was going to be, and they were looking for research perhaps on a product concept or maybe market opportunity or population sizes of a target market. But marketing wasn't sitting at the table with product development. we were an adjunct service to help propel the product. Today, companies like Google, they're seeing lead times for new products continuously shrinking. Initial teams are partnering with marketing upfront in the concepting of new products. And not only that, but they're attuned to prototyping products early in the development cycle, getting them in front of consumers, and in real time, harvesting insights in a cycle of testing, learning, and iteration. That's a cycle that should never, ever stop in a live service game. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Marketers are central to the process. We work closely with product development teams to help bring our knowledge to the table at the beginning of the concepting of a product. We want to think about how those customers or players are going to use the product from beginning to end. What happens as a result of this partnership is that A, the time to market can be shortened. B, the market launch can be more successful, and what we're seeing is faster adoption and improved advertising ROI at launch. That's not a theoretical statement. I did that and I've seen it happen, and I know that it can work. And I hope that if there's one thing you guys pick up on today, it's that process of thinking through the player journey and constantly prototyping, testing, and iterating. You can't start soon enough no matter what type of prototype it is. It can even be on paper. I've done some crazy things like prototyping through a live stream, you know, a private password protected live stream, and putting people through web pages and literally asking them questions as they were clicking buttons. So it doesn't have to be high tech, and it doesn't have to be expensive with research firms. All right, moving on. All right, one of the most famous examples, and this is one I used in the past when I was starting a project with a game team. I did a presentation similar to this one, and we talked about who we wanted to be as a game and what type of player experience we wanted to deliver. And I did an introduction to the Disney wristband. The Disney wristband has become ubiquitous, I think, in pop culture as a reference for, you know, the epitome of a great customer experience. But it didn't come easy. It wasn't something where they just sat down and say, hey, you know what? It'd be a lot more convenient for people if they just had like a thing, a chip on their wrist, and they could walk around our whole park. What do you think, Joe? Hey, I like it. Let's do it. It didn't happen like that. It took 10 years. And it took something like 15 different departments to come together. And some of those departments were in different divisions and had never cooperatively worked on a project before. But somebody recognized that there were friction points in that experience from the time that customer walked through that front gate to the time they left. And some things were causing people frustration. And for that reason, that wristband came into being. And the Disney wristband is a symbol of what we can do when we partner with other teams, when we look at our business from the customer side of the experience, and we put our customer hat on, and we literally go out in that park, and we walk through that turnstile, and then we get on rides and try to find our way around and buy things and eat things and go back and forth to hotels, and we'll start to feel the challenge and the friction points. And that's what all of us need to do with our products and our games. We have to take that ride from the customer's side of the fence and make sure we're empathetic to what it feels like. One of the most important things that I would tell my teams is we have to think like a player, then think like an owner. And there isn't one day that I don't go in where I don't think like a player, then think like an owner. If this was my business, would I want that to be my store? Would I want that to be my day one, hour one, minute one experience? And those are things that a person like me in the marketing team needs to bring up at that table when you're starting to think about your new product or your new game. It's not easy. Believe me, when I did it the first time, I will tell you it was one of the hardest things I ever did in my career. And there were a lot of times that I didn't know if we would actually get through it. And I was crazy enough to think it would be like a 12-week process, but it was more like a 9-month process. And so, I mean, this isn't to say these things are easy, but they are worthwhile. Live service games depend on these kinds of flows because they're the front door and the first impression of our service. For example, the first impression most people have with our brands is often navigating the website simply to register, purchase, and download our games, arguably the most important part of the process. In fact, a lot of games are losing more people in the download process than anywhere else in the cycle. And yet, how much effort and energy do we put into looking at what's happening at each point in that cycle before they're even in the game? I've had the opportunity to do it, and it's frightening. I'll admit that. And the good news is that when you find those things, it's a big aha moment, and it feels great to find them. Fixing them is not easy. It has to be a commitment from the top of the organization. And I hope that after today, we'll all feel like we have that same level of commitment. We have to be the people in our companies that evangelize this type of thinking. So customer journeys are what this is all about. Netflix and Hulu, for example, they map multiple customer journeys at the inception of a product, and they start mapping out different user profiles. And when I say user profiles, that means a lot of different things. For example, with some of these companies, it's heavy users, like Netflix and Hulu look at heavy users, light users, new users, returning users, tech-savvy users, not tech-savvy users, children, adults, older people. So depending on what your product is, you have to think about multiple player journeys. Sometimes in companies, we think about player motivations, and so we use motivations as a way to map the journey. So we say, this one player is coming to our game because they're socially motivated. They want to get connected to other people and play the game with those people. They may even be coming with friends. How do we make it easy for them to come in with friends and all register together and maybe start a guild or a group right there, you know, in the second or third click they make? Do we think those things through? We might think about some players who come in with the motivation of, I just want to be a badass, for lack of a better word. You know, I'm that guy or woman who wants to just rip through, kill everyone, kill everything, pwn everything in sight, and I'm going to be at the top of the leaderboard. I don't really want anything in my way as I'm pursuing that path. And then there's everything in between those two, and we also have to think about those people in between. What are their motivations, and how do we satisfy those every time they log in? Can we? How do we do it? In summary, leveraging marketing early in the cycle sets the bar. It can set the bar for product quality at launch. And it can also create a brand identity paradigm that starts to differentiate your game in the space, right, in your segment. And we all know games or products, right, that kind of set that bar and have established that paradigm. A lot of people talk about World of Warcraft when they talk about games that are accessible, games that are easy to get into. Again, people talk about Disney as one of those companies that's made their customer experience super friction-free. However, this type of development and this type of product design, it's stressful. It puts a whole new level of stress on the traditional development process. Dev teams are not given the direction or guidance to invest in player journeys or service flows, although they tend to be the key to lifetime value. Like I said, when I did this the first time, I thought, hey, 12 weeks, I'll go to where these people are. They were in a different country than I was, and I'll hang out, we'll sit down, we'll start working this through. And it turned out to be a 9-month process, and even then it wasn't really done. But the player journey we mapped out went from one end of this wall to the other, no kidding. And we had it printed on a huge piece of paper, and it was the kind of paper you could write on, you know, with a marker. So you could constantly walk up and be changing things and be, you know, moving lines around and stuff like that. And it really became sort of a working document that lived on for a while. We also had people putting stickies on it when they had questions or concerns or things that they didn't understand that they thought were relevant. So it ended up being a very cool experience, but again, a lot of friction in the process as well. So that is my first big trend that I want to share, is bring marketing in early or in the cycle of product development. The number one trend is there is a changing role of marketing in product development, and those companies that are embracing that change are the companies that we all see, you know, on the cover of Fortune magazine, and the companies that I think we all like to do business with day in and day out. All right, moving on. Emerging trend number 2. Engagement is the name of the game. So like we started the event tonight, engagement is not impressions. Engagement is not reach. Engagement is not how many people are in this room either. But engagement is the number of people that, when I started out with 2 truths and a lie, engagement is how many people participated in guessing the truth from the lie. Engagement is getting people to interact with us and build a relationship. And that's what we're all about in any business today, much less in the gaming business. On average today, Americans are spending about 116 minutes every day on social media. Longer than some dates. Longer than it probably takes Batman to get to the bat signal.
Or during a date, as in.
Exactly, or during a date. Consumers are drowning in messages on all fronts. So that's something that we have to be aware of and then try to leverage. There's messages everywhere you look, and this is what we're competing against. When you go to the ATM, there's messages, you know, on your bus or on your subway, on the cabs you see, taxi toppers, buses, mall kiosks. When you're in the airport, they're all over the place. Baggage claim, malls, airport charging stations, kiosks, large buildings. And anywhere you see people waiting or standing around, they're looking at some kind of messaging. And it's not just one age group demographic. It's starting to penetrate all ages, and it's getting to be a pretty broad segment of people. No matter where you go, you're getting pummeled with messaging. And hopefully, some of that messaging is actually exciting and relevant. eMarketer reported in May of 2019 that US adults will spend triple the amount of time on mobile social network apps this year versus mobile messaging apps. This is something I came across about a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, where the world is starting to shift from social channels to mobile messaging apps. Does anyone know what I'm talking about when I talk about that? What am I talking about?
Yeah, switching from the Facebook to directly speaking in groups and social messages.
That's right. So something like Messenger, something like WhatsApp, and there's a whole bunch of other things that are out there as well. And really Discord, to me right now, is one of the best examples of that, where a lot of people can be together virtually, talking, sharing. You can probably do a face-to-face like Skype, but for sure it's voice, and it's sharing through other means, like games or other things that you're connected to. So if social engagement has to be your goal, engagement is the most important aspect. Engagement is how you'll succeed. Why? Because all of us here are building communities, not views. I view a lot of things like we just saw, right? But it doesn't mean that any of those things is sticking with me if I'm not engaged. even today, there's engagement in vehicles. Many vehicles have AR, VR, voice activated types of systems in them to actually anticipate a person's needs when they're driving and then activate when they see different triggers happening in the car. You see the slide of Wendy's. How many people have ever looked at Wendy's social, any of it? Anybody in here looked at Wendy's?
Brilliant.
Unbelievable. I mean, bar none, freaking unbelievable. I mean, they have an attitude, they have a brand personality, they're fast on the comebacks, and they're super engaging. I've also seen the same thing with Virgin Airlines, if you've ever done anything with them. So that same capacity. Most of us don't have quite that ability to be that responsive and also that creative, but that is definitely, you know, aspirational value, is to look at what they're doing and try to understand why do they do that, how do they do that, and how can I do that. What you want to do to drive engagement is you want to make sure that you offer a return for the time that people invest. You want to make sure that you allow people to participate, and you want to keep your followers engaged by responding like they do, retweeting, resharing, and rewarding people. To succeed, we have to focus on engagement because we're all about communities. You can get, I wanted to mention that a lot of people say, you know, managing social media is a little bit of a chore if you're really doing it in any comprehensive fashion. I see some nods. You're trying to manage multiple channels, you're trying to manage maybe multiple communities, you start to realize there's a little different personality on each one. There are a lot of tools out there. I don't know if anyone has any they love. Some of them are free, a lot of them are free and downloadable, and they're certainly great to start with. Things like TweetDeck I use every day. That is up on my screen. And I'm constantly looking at and following all the people that are talking about the game I work on and the other things that I know are relevant to the people who are talking about the game that I work on. And the minute any one of them posts, I see it, I can see what they're saying, what they're doing, if I should reply, and I have a sense of what's happening in my community. Anyone else use TweetDeck or ever used TweetDeck? There's also Hootsuite, Brandwatch, Snaplytics, Spreadfast. Does anyone ever use that?
I wish I worked with somebody that had the budget to do that.
Me too.
I think that was Capital Factory Baby, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Started here?
it was. It was awesome. I mean, for those people who got to work with them. But they were a local Austin company, and it's just another example of it allows you to share a tool with other people in your company, no matter where they're located. It allows you to collaborate on assets that you might be wanting to put on social, and again, share them out. It's a way to work with global partners as well, and it becomes another thing that you have up on your screen and that you're looking at, and it makes your life easier if social is a big part of your job. So let's move on and talk a little bit about how do we succeed at this incredibly complex part of our business. This is another one of my favorite things. Did anybody see the HBO Twitter feed when they gave everybody the opportunity to get Sopranos nicknames? Did anyone in and throw their name in? It was awesome. I saw Federer got a name where it said Fedman, and Wendy's, of course, jumped in, as you can see, in their usual way. Everybody was pitching out names. It was amazing how many people got engaged in that Twitter activation. And why do you think it was so successful? Any thoughts?
Because it was relatable?
Totally relatable and timely, right? Relevant and timely to what was happening in the moment. And what else?
It was personalized.
Exactly. It was personalized and it was engagement driven, right? I engaged with it, and not only would you engage with it, but then you wanted to see what everyone else got as their name. So it fed that, you know, oh, what's he gonna get? What's she gonna get? And it was just really fun. So joining conversations is a big part. Starting conversation is a big part. Twitter is very important. Per research, Twitter says that their active users describe themselves as influencers and early adopters within their social circles. They are opinionated and receptive to interacting, but the majority of Twitter users, per their own research, are the early adopters for things and people who will engage first and then get their friends to engage. Engaging people by asking their opinion is a good way to engage. Anyone who's done social media knows polls are awesome, right? It almost doesn't matter what the poll is, but polls are awesome, and polls always pull for you and they get people engaged. The more controversial and brand relevant you can make them, the better. I've seen a lot of polls done and been in on a few, and it never ceases to amaze me. Twitter users are also 40% more likely to recommend brands when they feel they've been heard by the brand. This type of engagement extends the relationship as well. What we see with social media is that we have to change the way we think about social media. Number one, we need to shift the way we think about influence. We want to empower our followers to spread their influence. So we're helping them spread their influence, right? The Twitter people themselves are saying, hey, we're opinionated, we're influencers. Anytime we give them a chance to spread their influence, it's going to be great for us. We already talked about polls. Another example is Heinz. Heinz kicked off a poll where they asked people if they would want to buy mayo chup. Anybody have an idea what mayo chup is?
Fry sauce. Yeah,
exactly. It's ketchup and mayo. No one even knew that Heinz actually made mayo. So that was the funny part of this whole thing. And they asked people, and they said that if 500,000 people responded, they would make it. Now, they did not get the 500,000, but here's what they did get. The highest poll response rate in Twitter history. Over 2 billion people were reached telling their friends to vote because they wanted to get that thing made. And what's amazing is that, and I heard a person from Twitter actually speaking to this, and she said, what's amazing is that 2 billion people were talking about ketchup and mayo. Condiments that, you know, basically we see every day, but whoever thinks about them. But that's Heinz's business. And for, you know, the better part of a day, their product was the #1 thing being talked about on Twitter. So that's a pretty amazing feat. And it's a great example of what you can do when you ask for people's opinions and you activate your influencers. Another thing to rethink when you're a brand using social is purpose. And this is something that both Twitter talked about. I've seen Microsoft talk about this as well. Microsoft is really on a mission these days to articulate a purpose-driven philosophy about their products, and you see it in everything they do. I don't know if anyone buys Microsoft products. Of course, my Surface is sitting right here. But Microsoft does a lot of things to help people through technology. And they get their employees engaged in it. I get their emails. They share a lot of that in their emails, which oftentimes, I don't know about you guys, but I don't usually share something that's going on internally in my company through email. But I've gotten several emails from Microsoft where I've seen them sharing some things they've done for diversity and other projects. And it makes me like Microsoft, and it makes me feel more engaged with Microsoft, and it drives up my loyalty. And I'm not saying that's why they're doing it, but it is what happens. So here's an example of Nike. A lot of people are familiar with this, but obviously Nike came up with this campaign, and it was based on what happened with Colin Kaepernick. And they built around it, and they came up with a brand purpose. believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. Now, you might not be, able to relate to the Colin Kaepernick specific example, but the idea of believing in something and really being committed to it resonates. And not only did they do it as a billboard, and then they did it as a video campaign, then they did it as a TV spot, and then they took every one of his comments down and broke it into tweets, one by one by one, every sentence that he said. So they took all of it and they brought it forward, and they made it their purpose. And in the midst of that, they stood by it, even though some people felt that it wasn't their purpose in life. However, the fact that they were willing to stand by it despite controversy and debate drove their stock up, as has happened before. So 57% of consumers who use social media when surveyed said they will buy a product based on the brand's position on social issues. 42% of brands on social have activated a purpose-driven message in the last 24 months. Examples: Tom's has a campaign going to end gun violence. Verizon has a thing for firefighters. Airbnb, commitments before campaigns, using the hashtag #WeAccept. It's also critical that, of course, these types of campaigns, brand purpose campaigns, they have got to be authentic. They have got to be that brand's truth, if you will. Obviously, they can't be created just to drive interaction or engagement or sales. But if the leaders of the brand have a purpose, and you as a marketing person can help them to articulate that purpose and make it part of your brand identity, it's a win for everyone. It's not only a win for perhaps the people who want to do business with you or who are in your community, but it can also be a win for the people who work at your company as well. Because it's nice to think that when you're working every day, you're working even for something bigger than just the one thing that you're doing. Does that make sense? And so that's valuable, whatever it may be. It's something I think about in my position now, which is, can I talk to the leaders of my company and find out, hey, do we have a brand purpose? When I spoke to the person at Microsoft who I saw talking about it, he said it took a good amount of time to get that discussion to happen and to get the leadership of the company to get comfortable with that idea. But the minute they were asked if they had a brand purpose, they absolutely had one, and they knew what it was, and they knew how they felt about what their company could do that could be bigger than any one product. So it's something really interesting, and again, if you influence the marketing, if you influence the brands, if you influence the design, if you work at a company, you have the ability to bring this conversation up and know that it's something that can be important and relevant. So that's a change that we need to start making. The next thing we need to start thinking about changing is frequency. So we talked about rethinking conversation, about starting conversations, activating your influencers. We started thinking about influence, and now we're thinking about relevancy and being radically relevant, which is kind of a weird way to say it, but we want to be there in the moment. We want to be able to share what's happening in the moment. And a lot of times what's happening has nothing to do with us, right? What's happening has something to do with what's going on in the world today. So it could be somebody winning a Grammy Award. It could be a horrible event that's happening like a hurricane. It can be championships. And believe it or not, I've worked on games where we've been able to leverage some of these events in our own brand relevant way. You can do it. Even if you're not a sports game, you can lean into tournaments and things like that. If you find creative ways to pit characters in your game against each other and come up with fun ways to celebrate what people in your community are into in that moment. Debates, ways to, again, leverage your game into debates of one character versus another, one event versus another, one ship versus another. So there's all different things that we look at every day that we're all talking about. And these are things that the people who follow us, who like us, and who engage with us are talking about. So it's great to be able to just jump in. Sometimes you can jump in and be relevant just by saying something like, we're celebrating such and such. Congratulations to such and such. I know one example I have is it was Mother's Day, and the brand I was working on wanted to jump in. It so happened we had done a game expansion, and the key art had a mother and a daughter facing off trying to kill each other. So, so don't ask how that became the key art. But so we put that up and said, sometimes mothers and daughters have unique relationships. What do you think? Happy Mother's Day. And you know, everybody jumped in, and it was amazing how many people had something to say about the types of relationships between mothers and daughters. And it was a way for us to create relevancy, obviously, you know, in a funny, irreverent fashion, but it resonated. And so those are things you can do. I've seen companies like Blizzard celebrating when Star Wars, when Lucasfilm and Disney first came out with the movie, when there hadn't been a movie in, I think, 10 years, right? And Blizzard celebrated that on their Twitter the day the movie came out in December. So obviously they're not a Star Wars game, but they found a way to jump in and celebrate that pop culture moment because they knew their community was celebrating it and they wanted to be relevant. I know a brand that I work on now, we tried to jump into the whole Game of Thrones momentum. And we saw Game of Thrones posting for the throne, hashtagging for the throne, and we have a throne thing going on in our game as well, and so we started using for the throne, take the throne, anything we could say about throne. We got in there with that and tried to build some relevancy. And when you think about it, the more you know about your customers, your players, your constituents, the better it is. A lot of times it's a great idea if you can look at the social media channels of the people who are some of your biggest followers and posters, right? So we have some people that tweet a lot about our game, and we would call them our influencers, our really committed players, and we can look at who they follow. And we can see the different games they follow, the different TV shows, if they're into cars, if they're into sports, and that can help us learn how to be more relevant and how to be more engaging with our community. So it's interesting what you can learn when you look at their Instagram or their Twitter or whoever they're following. So those are really great things to do. I personally follow anyone who's tweeting or streaming the games I work on. So I know when they go live, I see what they're tweeting, I know what they're into. And it definitely helps me not only to stay engaged with the community around my game, but it helps me to understand other things that maybe it's somebody I should do a partnership with because it's something they're into. What kind of pets do they have? Are they dog people or are they cat people? That's always a big thing in gaming, right? Are they dog people or are they cat people? So, you know, looking at all that stuff just helps you know a little more about the customers that you're trying to have a relationship with. The other thing that's interesting about social media is, again, social media is like an awesome research opportunity and it's free. Because a lot of times when you look across the channels, your players and your customers are telling you what they think about what you're doing. And what I try to do is I try to look across multiple channels, from the social channels to things like Reddit to things like Discord. And when I see common threads emerging, those are things that I give my attention to. That's how I start to identify, you know, things that are of lower importance or lesser importance and things that we need to pay attention to and start to be responsive to. Does anyone here ever see things like that across different social channels with their products and look at how and what people are saying across? Does anyone here look at YouTube comments?
That's not a good idea.
I mean, YouTube comments are like, the truth lives here. It's amazing. You know, early in my career, it was my job to like reply to that stuff and look at all those comments and think of what to reply. And I started seeing early on, wow, interestingly enough, YouTube comments are really significant and impactful, and they're not just like your video was good, your video was bad. It's about your product. And I came to believe that people think if you take the time to make a video, you're definitely going to be reading the comments, but it is, if you don't look at YouTube, you really should.
Question, how did you survive the toxicity?
You know, it's weird. I have the ability, like, I'm interested in understanding what players think because it's my job to get more of them and to keep them. And I think I'm more empathetic. So I go the route of I'm really feeling, you know, empathy for the players. And since I'm not the person literally making the product, maybe I have a little bit of that space where I can empathize a little more. I also understand the challenges and what are creating some of those issues. But I try to help then articulate what's really at the root of what's being said. But the best part of it is when you see the correlation, and I think that's what helps with social media, is just seeing something that you see in YouTube comments is then something that you're seeing on your Discord channel, or something that you're seeing people talk about on Reddit or in other places. And so when you see that symmetry occurring, then you know, hey, this is a thing. And yes?
Did you spend any time deleting some of those comments?
Doing what?
Do you spend any time deleting some of those comments?
We do delete some comments. We delete very few, but we do delete some. We don't delete the ones that I'll say are, you know, people giving a comment that's constructive, even if it's not something we really want to hear. But we'll delete something, especially if somebody's commenting on someone else's comment. Because you'll see some of those where there's 2 or 3 people that'll comment and they'll start to get in a little bit of a tiff. And so we will delete some of those. And we've had this situation where it may seem like somebody from another game is commenting and then people from your game are commenting back to them. And so we try to eliminate that kind of thing because YouTube or wherever it may be happening, that's not the place for that debate, but we've seen some of that happen.
I remember with, so like with Reddit, and you were talking about YouTube as well, I remember at BioWare we had a really active forum. So how good was, like, say, the forum versus like YouTube comments and things like that?
Well, that's where you see some synergy occasionally. So the forums are definitely deeper and more detailed, and I think I'd consider the forums in some cases more challenging to deal with than the YouTube comments. They are people who are emotionally engaged with your product, and so, you know, they really want to make their point, and sometimes to make the point, they'll use emotionally engaging language, you know, so they get whoever is reading it, get that attention. Whereas YouTube, they're more like just telling you what they think because they think you're gonna hear it. But the forums is, hey, I paid for this game and I want you to know, you know? So I think it's a little, it's definitely more detailed, more specific. Those are longer. And a lot of times they're more useful, you know, for everybody involved.
So is there, you know, considering forums used to be the only thing that you could depend on and you'd have to run it yourself, but now there are things like Reddit where you could use it as your official forums if you wanted to, but it's not absolutely yours, so you can do things like tie it to accounts or anything like that. Is there a hard and fast rule about whether or not you even do forums anymore, or does it just
You know,
depend?
that's a great question. I don't think there is a hard and fast rule, but I will say in one place I've been, the philosophy was forums are dead to us in the sense that they're closed communities. You have to have a game code or be a registered, you know, you have to have some level of identity to get into the forums, and therefore anything that we're putting into the forums has a very limited set. Now, I also had a policy where anytime like our dev guys posted on forums, it literally went and got posted on Twitter. Anything we posted on forums, we dual posted on Facebook or Twitter so that it got out there and those conversations got socialized. But only the dev, you know, the higher level dev guys, when they're commenting and they're engaging, we wanted other people to see it. But I think the sense of it is that they should all be able to live in harmony, and you just have to understand how to manage it.
Sure. Although you just brought up another thing that may not have a hard and fast rule, the whole idea of developers posting at all.
Right, that's another thing.
Probably don't want to do that.
That is another thing. We had a training for that, although, you know, it's never a perfect world, but we did like almost a PR training for people that were posting on the forums. And we were pretty judicious about who was allowed to post on the forums. And we didn't have like, hey, open season. You know, we had identified people, and we had a community manager who really watched over that and helped to guide it. And much more of that was done by the community manager than anyone else. And a lot of times we would get quotes from the dev guys to put in those responses. So, hey, I went and talked to Joe, producer, and he understands what you're saying and we're actually working on that. Or he understands what you're saying and thanks for sharing.
Right.
You know, but we did some stuff like that. But there's a lot of belief that, you know, forums in and of itself is not worthy of huge investment.
Thank you.
I think it is, because I think, I look at it as separate but equal. It's a separate, you know, it's a separate place where people wanna talk to us and they feel that we should be talking to them. And as long as people wanna talk to me about my brand and help me to understand how to service them better, I'm up for it.
So on forums, you talked about, you know, they have to register, you can also have it so they don't register.
Right.
Say that might be better, because a lot of things say it's better to have register, so.
Yes.
So that, you don't have toxicity so much, or, you know, everyone's accountable.
Right.
But is it?
I have never seen that done. I've always seen it where it's gated, where you have, you know, some relationship with the product. So, you know, my thought on that would be, I think it's good to have that type of person have access to forums, because they're invested in your brand. Like it or lump it, you know, they may be the most difficult people, but they're also people that are probably spending a lot of money or spending some money on our product, and we need to embrace them and we need to hear what they have to say. Again, I try to look across the spectrum of feedback and then look at where I'm seeing things rising up, you know, that are sort of ubiquitous across all those channels, and bring those things to the attention of the people that need to know about them.
Just related to that, not to put too fine a point on official forums, but if you tie it to the account and make it available at all, you're starting to blur the line exactly what is the service. Like, everyone assumes that it's, you buy the game, you want to play the game. But then you have to follow the rules of the forums. You want to use that. You then restrict access to the forums or to the game entirely, and it's another layer of that relationship between you and the player at that point.
Right. Agree. And today also, a lot of people, when you ask people on the forums, they're also on other social channels, and they'll be the first ones to tell you they are. So, but they want that additional access.
Sure.
They want to get to you wherever you are and wherever they are. And again, I take it as a positive. If no one was talking to us on the forums, I'd have to be looking for another job. So, I mean, you wanna have rabid fans, and when people are paying you, particularly if you have a subscription model, you know, there is a relationship that's going on there. And all I'm saying is that forums is one kind of person, and so we can't spend all our time there. I also look at what our competitors' social channels are doing, how often they are posting, and I trend my ratio of likes to dislikes to their ratio of likes to dislikes. So I only do it for like 3 competitors, but I just look at, in general, our likes to dislikes, are people liking us more or less as each month goes by or as each video gets posted or what have you, right? And then how are we trending compared to our competitors? Are we doing a better job of building that relationship with players? Are we doing a worse job? And what are some of the criteria of understanding that? Is it how often we post? Like, we have one competitor who outposts us like crazy, especially on Twitter and Facebook. Well, definitely on Twitter. They're posting a lot, they're posting regularly, but our likes to dislikes ratios are pretty much the same. So them posting twice as much as we are is not necessarily, from what I can see, a defining factor in how much people like them.
Yeah, familiarity can breed contempt, and how can I miss you if you won't go away?
Yeah, yes.
How do you determine how often do you post? Because like if you post it too often, then people would unfollow you, right? But at the same time, if you don't post often enough, then like people may not notice you, right?
It's true. I mean, I'll say in all honesty, we post like per what the channel's own research says to do. So, we kind of follow the best practices party line. There's so many times that I want to post more, and even my own team is like, they're just gonna unfollow us, they're just gonna unfollow us. So, I mean, we pretty much stick when we post and how often we post on the different channels, by and large is pretty much based on our own like Google Analytics and Facebook Analytics and the best practices that you get from each of them. Like Google and Facebook are amazing at saying, here's what you do if you want to be successful. So we kind of do what they say is the right thing to do.
If you're going to be paying to drive users to a platform, do you try and do it to your own, like your forums, your own thing, or do you try to do it to one of the social media ones? Because I know a lot of companies got burned by driving their giant user base to Facebook, and then Facebook all of a sudden decided they were going to charge them for trying to talk to the users.
That's a really good question, and it's a great question. So I will never drive anyone to something that my brand doesn't own. So if we do emails, even in our tweets and posts, we always tag them with our game brand name. We always try to tag things that bring people back to our brand. When we send out emails, we're always sending people to our website because that's where you can become a customer, you can become a player, you can become a payer. So ultimately, the goal is to get people to that website and to get people, into the game and into the community. I mean, first and foremost, we just want them in the community, but ultimately, we want them in our game, right, and playing. So always invest in sending people back to where you benefit.
So you basically always need your own website, your own forums that are a place where you own the customer.
Right. I mean, typically, I don't ever send anyone to the forums. Because it's not the first impression I want to make. It can be pretty deep, and who knows what's going on there. Just like any social channel, right? For all I know, somebody, who knows what could be going on. I will always send people to where I have the greatest control over the experience that they're going to have. Now, I have had plenty of experiences where the website wasn't necessarily perfectly perfect, and every page, didn't have the best flow and the best conversion, but I'd still rather have you come to that website if I can get you there, where it says play now or buy now or whatever it says, sign up, because that is going to be the best way for me to develop a long-term relationship with you that is putting you into the funnel. The funnel usually starts on that website. And you can have your funnel start on YouTube. Like today, if you're a YouTube partner, right, you have the ability to have, the last frame on any of your videos has a subscribe button or a button that you can have linked back to, like we have ours linked back to our homepage. So, and the same thing with Twitch, where you can have things that link back to your homepage. So, and actually it's true on all of them now. But YouTube, I think, is probably the best and most lucrative. So you wanna, look for that and make sure you do it. Like, I'll be honest and say, on YouTube, to be a YouTube partner, you have to spend money. And when I used to spend money, it didn't matter if it was me personally spending money or another brand in my company was YouTube partner. Then I went to another company and I didn't understand why you didn't have the subscribe button and why the YouTube wasn't linking back. And then I realized, oh, it's because somebody has to spend money. So today, I have a budget of $1.65 a month that I spend on YouTube, and that's the lowest amount you can spend per month on YouTube, and by God, we're spending it. And you know, every week I get an update of how many customers came to that site. And also, I'll get it off the topic for a moment. If you do that, you can also see who's buying your name and who's buying the words that, like, we use a lot of, you know, hashtag words that we think are for our brand. And so we saw someone using and actually spending on our name and a couple of the hashtags we were using. And, you know, so now we know who's out to get us and who some of our competition is. They happen to be not exactly the same kind of game we are, but they had the same kind of theme. So it's interesting, other information that you can get, and so, of course, we're gonna retarget their people and use their hashtags. All's fair. But I mean, it was good that just because I spent $1.65, I can see, you know, all those words that I put in that I consider my meta, you know, tags. And then it allowed me to see if anyone was spending money on any of those meta tags. Has anyone else had a good experience like that with YouTube? No?
I wouldn't say it's like that. You're probably gonna go into it later, but basically like influencers, streamers like PewDiePie, stuff like that. Those were always the biggest hits whenever we had them. So YouTube is always the biggest thing that ever brought traffic to our games.
I'll say so too. I mean, definitely if you can put out a good video, you're gonna get people into your product. That's for sure. All right, moving on, we have to get to the third trend and then we'll take our break. Oh, we're almost like on time here. It's amazing. So these are just more social media moments. We went through the ground rules. I didn't talk about Twitch, which is probably one of my other most favorite channels. And I will say, if anyone here has any kind of a product or brand that has relevancy to be streamed, and that could be a cooking, you know, utensil all the way up to games, right? People stream everything now. But Twitch is also a great way to build your brand. And I found in some of the metrics that I trend that we do see business impact when we have a big push on Twitch and we have a lot of people streaming in a period of time. We definitely see an increase in straight acquisition into the funnel, and occasionally we see a slight conversion increase as well. But there's no doubt that that ability to be seen by over 600 million people that are moving around that site every single day is valuable if it's the right kind of visibility. And again, you don't want to hire influencers who aren't authentically playing your game, because that can come back to haunt you and it can come out to be very hollow, and you don't always get the right people when you do that. But when you find great people who are authentically into your game, it is beneficial, and a lot of people will pop up. And again, Twitch has great information that they give you. There's a couple different pages that you can go to where you can see your own Twitch metrics. You can see who the biggest streams you had. Not only they'll tell you during that hour or during that stream which stream gave you the most followers, and also which stream did most people defect from, because people are also opting in and opting out of Twitch just like they are any of the other social media channels. So you can see where you gained and where you lost. You can see average minutes watched, so you can see you might have had a lot of people watching one streamer, but the average minutes was low, whereas another streamer may have had fewer people, but they were there longer. So what's better for your game? Is it better to just see you for like a minute and just get an impression, or is it better if people are really engaged and staying there for a while? So you have to, you know, understand what's better. But has anyone used Twitch and felt like benefits from Twitch? Yeah, I'd imagine. Twitch is, it's amazing, and the good thing about Twitch is typically you have somebody that'll work with you at Twitch, and if you want help or advice or direction, there's a lot of that out there. All right, moving on, trend number 3. So let's regroup for a second. So we started by talking about marketing, the changing role of marketing, the product cycle really becoming a lot shorter and faster, being able to recognize gains by mapping journeys in advance and talking about even service flows. That's something that most traditional development teams don't do. And building that cycle of testing, prototyping, and iterating, right? So now we're going to talk about the third emerging trend, which is ongoing continuous optimization. So after your product goes live, the work doesn't stop. It triples. So, you know, you can see all the different things that are going on, and that's just one view of what's happening. But as we all know, it's kind of like a whole world opens up, and suddenly the amount of interactions, the player journeys that we mapped, are they true? Are they legitimate? Do we need to adapt them, update them, change them? Is Shy Steve finding people to connect with in an authentic manner, or is Shy Steve in your game for 2 days and then falling out? If you're a game that, you know, has the need for people to group and play together, you need to understand what's happening and how to get people in your game and staying in your game. So let's talk about that for a moment. Okay. What happens when the game launches? If you've played your cards right at the beginning up to this point, then you thought about who you were targeting. You thought about the player journeys that you were going to need to serve, starting with your website, right, where people come first to find out about the game, register for the game, hopefully purchase the game. Now we're live. What happens next? We have to make sure that we can rationalize and optimize what we projected would happen against what's really happening. And that means not all of us sitting in a room debating it. It means us having metrics that are behavioral metrics, tracking what's happening in the game. One way to do that is to know what your game's about and what your game needs to do for players to be successful. So a player journey isn't just, you know, the Disney wristband wasn't just about, hey, let's try to remove friction. It was about getting people to have fun, getting people to have a good time, getting people to want to spend more time in their park. And that's the same thing we want to do in live service games. We want to get more people in the front door, but then we want them to come back for day 2 and day 3 and day 40. And so to do that and to know what's happening once they go in, we need triggers. Something that is often done in this area is at the beginning when you're talking about the game, thinking through, hey, what are the things that someone has to do to be successful in this game? They have to join and play with other players. Okay, so we might want to find out or think through, how do we get people connected to other people early in the cycle so that they can be successful, because playing with other people is going to be a critical success factor. And we need people to level up so they get points to spend on higher value weapon and gear that allows them to kill bigger, better creatures and become more proficient at the game, because earning rewards and leveling up makes people feel good, right? It's a success factor. So we would have an idea of, say, hey, when do we think a person would be hitting level 10 or level 20 or level 50? And we'd say, if they're going to be happy and successful, do they hit level 10 day 1? Do they hit level 50 day 2? We need to understand that leveling velocity. And sometimes you just put a stake in the ground. Or you may have had other games that you can look at and say, hey, there are other games in this brand that people have bought and played. Let's look at the most successful people, and then maybe we extrapolate that to this game. Like, I worked on a Mass Effect game, so you could say, does Mass Effect 3 then become a proxy for, say, Mass Effect Andromeda? or whatever comes next? Are there other things you can use as proxies that you know about? If your game is like Fortnite, is there a way you can use Fortnite? How many times do people log in? When in the journey do you expect a person to spend? You have to start to understand what translates to success, and then you map it. You put triggers in the game so that you can see if those things are happening. So, for example, we said, hey, we want to get people connected on day one. On day one, people have to connect to other people, because if they don't, they cannot be successful in this game. So we made a way for people to get connected on day one, and then we looked at what happened, right? What percentage of those people who got into that funnel and got connected and got the reward for connecting came back on day two versus the people who didn't? And we looked at this in our alpha and beta testing because it was a day one experience. And so we were able to start looking at what was going to happen day one and what did we need to happen. And we actually identified 5 goals. There are 5 things that we said had to happen on day one so that people would come back for day two. Like simple things like they had to know who they were and what their role was in the game. What is their big mission? Why are they here? What fight are they fighting? What happens if they're not here, right? I mean, people want to believe in the fantasy of your game. Make sure they know what it is and they get connected to it, because that drives engagement. And we had to make sure that by the time they logged out on day one, they knew the basic gameplay mechanics, so that they knew when they came back on day two, they were going to be comfortable. They knew how to equip gear. They knew how to use weapons. They knew how to loot creatures or monsters. They knew how to navigate the map, right? They knew basic gameplay mechanics. So those are just some things that we would identify and then put triggers in to see if those were happening. So whatever your product's meant to do, you can think through, hey, what has to happen on day one if they are gonna come back for day two? And how do we spec it out? How do we measure it? What triggers would we put in? How do we see it? So those are things that you need to talk about, and as a team, come up with that speculation and begin to start to define what success looks like. Does success mean that the velocity is on day one, we're seeing 50% of the people who play our game day one, by the time they log out, they're level 12. So that's average. So if we see a person above level 12, we're ready to push them to the next place in life. If we see somebody below level 1, they need a little more hand-holding and help. Maybe that help comes from the website and we have a getting started playlist. Maybe that help comes from emails if they're opted in, but we know only some of them are. Maybe that help comes from other places in our community that we identify with players. Like right now, we're putting a link to our Getting Started playlist in the email you get after you actually purchase the game. So there's like a purchase confirmation that pops up, and in the bottom of that, we're saying our game is better with friends, and so we're putting that refer a friend nudge, and then we're also saying check out the new player playlist, so that we're also getting people the idea that, hey, if you're new, there's a Getting Started playlist. So we're trying to get people engaged and retain them. Day one is the biggest churn day in the life cycle of your game. Believe it or not. Even when they spend $60, even when it's a high-level AAA franchise that people have played other versions of, you still have the same challenge day one. It does not matter. Anybody have any idea of, on average, how long a day one gameplay experience is? How long are people in there? How long do you have to snag them and get them really engaged?
15 minutes.
15? What do you say in the back?
I would say about an hour. Yeah. For me, you gotta catch me like in 3 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 6 minutes.
Yeah, 5.
The first 10 minutes.
Oh my God, okay, I need to leave immediately. Go back to the office. Wow, so something better blow up. You better get a kick-ass gun in the first 3 minutes. You better meet a kick-ass monster and kill it, or make a friend.
I actually got stuck in like a queue Arcage, the first day, it was like, it was in queue hell for the whole day, and you've got like probably a minute, and it dropped you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you don't even get to play the game at all.
Yeah.
You get this dumb number.
That actually happened to me with Anthem, the day I installed it. I got through the opening mission, got into the tower, and the thing kept booting me.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding, I have not put it back in since.
That's awful. I just feel really bad about that. That should never happen. That's terrible. I mean, those kind of things should not happen. And you know what? That's not the first story like that. And it's awful. And I'm sure the people that made that game didn't want that to happen. So that's why we have to think these things through in advance and push for these service flows and things like that to really get thought through, because day one is critical. And most of the research I've seen, day one is about an hour. But you're right about, like, in the first 3 minutes, if we don't get you excited and do something positive, if you don't have a positive encounter, experience, or something good doesn't happen in the first 3 minutes, it's definitely harder. What we don't want is to only put people through, like we used to call them tutorials, and I don't know, like, I never like tutorials. If I see the word tutorial, I skip it, and I'm probably the person that needs it most, right? So we don't ever want to call things tutorial or even think of them in that way. We want to think of fun, crazy experiences, but they're optimized to be fun and rewarding.
Would it depend on the price of the game, like how long you kind of have to play it to be hooked or whatever? Like if you basically, if it's a free game, right, you're not going to spend more than like 1 minute on it, right? But if it's something that you paid like $29.99, then you're probably going to spend like at least 2 hours kind of like playing it before you decide.
I have looked at quite a few different games on the spectrum, from free to play, almost like kid-ish, not a kid's game, but from free to play, light-hearted content games to hardcore AAA franchise experiences. And believe it or not, I think they're all pretty similarly coming in around an hour across a lot of data. So it is, they may be mentally disengaged because they haven't maybe had fun or had a great experience or gotten rewarded, but on average people are spending about an hour. Whether it's free to play or you played $60. I think the really scary thing is that a lot of people, like you just mentioned, you lose them on day one. They never come back, even when they paid you $60. Some people are paying more than that, right? Because they bought all the bells and whistles. And did you just pay the flat rate, or did you have one where you got extra stuff?
I pre-ordered, so I had a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
I think mobile games, they have like almost like a few seconds.
That's
They have a
right.
Really high drop.
That's right, they do. And also 90% of mobile games are uninstalled day one. Within 24 hours, 90% of, I never uninstall anything. Like, I uninstall like rarely on my phone. But actually, that's a metric. What?
Depends on the storage, depends how much storage you have.
Well, you have a big fat phone.
I guess so. All right. So anyway, in today's environment of customer centricity, player expectations have never been higher. And like we said before, cars are talking to you, elevators are talking to you. When you go to the movies, no one's talking to you. You can just walk right in and go right to your seat and order food and all that great stuff. And if we don't make sure that we make a good impression as early as we can in that first day of gameplay, we may not ever get a second chance, like you just shared with us. It's really important, and this will be the last thing I say, and then we can take a break. It's really important that you use data. Today there's new tools, to make these decisions, that you're looking at whatever it is that you think translates to success for your game, and you're staking out some claims with some data, maybe from your alpha. Maybe you just had a group of insiders come in and play it a couple of times, but somewhere you make a decision on what you think those triggers are, and then you look at them. And you can use some tools like machine learning or AI. People are using both of those. But what you want to do is begin to look at how behaviors are impacting your business and what you can do to understand player behavior, and not just one ubiquitous player, right? There's different players, and some players are gonna look like they're not gonna come back and they're getting into the vulnerable state, and you wanna have a different type of action on the marketing side or communication side to be responsive to them right away, day one. So on day one, when that person logs out, you know if they're vulnerable or you know if they're engaged. How do you know that? How would you know that? Somebody tell me. How would we know that? What? Metrics. We put like, and I hate to use this word, but in one game I worked on, we had a tutorial mission, right? A first mission that you got, that everybody got, and it was geared to give you a reward. So we said they're engaged. We defined engagement as they completed the tutorial mission, they collected the reward. The first time I played it, I didn't collect the reward. I didn't even know where it was. So that was good learning, because the screen was, you know, a little complex there. So it's like, hey, where's my reward? I work here. I know there's supposed to be one. And, you know, so again, you have to go through your own game as, you know, from the player side of the fence. But you can say, look, there's something we think people do on day one, and that tells me they made it past, they got engaged. And then there's another thing they might do, and it tells you, okay, they're now active. And then there's another place where you say they're committed, and then there's another place where you might say they're passionate. And in each one of those things, you need to be doing things, and it's like those shows where it's like the road's forking, right? So I get to this point, if I'm this guy, maybe you're forking me to the right, and if I'm this guy, you're forking me to the left, and if I'm this person, maybe you're encouraging me to go down the middle. And how do you do that? Well, if you have mobile opt-in, you can do it through push notifications. You can tell people by their behavior what thing is in there for them to do now and encourage them to come back and do that thing. But again, you have to be willing to kind of map out a journey, put some triggers in there that you can pull through whatever it is you use. And again, there's lots of tools out there. If you want to do this, it can be done. It can be done through a lot of the standard database stuff. It can be done through different platform optimizations. But what's really important is that marketing and devs sit down and say, how do we know day one if someone's coming back? And how do we respond to them immediately that day so that we try to get them back through social, through email, through the website, through whatever tools we have. So that's everything that I have to share, and I'm willing to take questions, and I know we have to take a break.
Okay, so one big hand for David Wolf. Three quick things. First, take out your timepieces and count down 10 minutes from now. That's when we're going to be coming back. Second thing, if you parked into the underground parking in this building, you will want to get a slip from the main desk now so you can get out for $7 as opposed to 32. And we do need to get out of here by 9 o'clock. Just thing to keep in mind, we got 1/2 hour left. 10 minutes, go.
Yeah, I was wondering because I could tell you two, we're all looking the same way.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when you mentioned that you worked at DC Universal Light, that's when you were interning recently. Yeah.
Oh, I've been gone for a while.
Did you work with Ryan at all? Ryan Hills?
No. Okay. He's the new like GM guy, right?
Yeah, from marketing.
Yeah. No, I did not work with him. I was at EA for like 8 years, so I've been gone from there for like 8 years.
Got it.
So I was like launch, and then we launched the PlayStation. So I was there for the PC launch and then the PlayStation launch, but not there for the
I'll do it on the weekends just to let you know.
And I loved that game. Like, It makes you feel like a superhero. Oh my god. And it's the easiest way to play. Like, I'm terrible at like hardcore games, and I was like, oh, I'm so into this right now. And the other thing I loved about DC was that you didn't have to run anywhere. Like, that was one of the things when we were making that game, and they were like, yeah, you know, it's just gonna come to you and say, hey, Batman needs your help, and all you have to do is click, and you're teleported right into the mission. And it's like, oh, no running, I'm out.
Does outreach things beyond tuition. Herman Eskernies is a narrative designer at EA.
To see that it's like months and months and months.
15 minutes bona fide, bring your game developer FaceTime, bring your resume, your portfolio, prepare to be judged.
I was so that's a dreamed out, right? I was so freaked
That was
out.
nice about it. A lot of times they were worried about
And I was just like, oh my
people.
god.
There it is.
I know.
Never talked to a bona fide game developer.
And there were so many Harleys.
Even a little bit of insight.
You know, it was like that was the biggest thing was how
What's up?
and you think of all these different things. I really don't get to
That's a school.
you know, and he did Syria.
What exactly are you looking
That was
for?
like, oh my god. So sad. I won't keep it on I feel like I've never been doing enough, you know, programs, and then
It is a
we never have enough hands.
So it's 8 months in the evening, starting twice a week and then 3 times a week. But it's about polishing people up so that every freedom will take it seriously. And they get to work together as a team. Where'd you graduate?
You brought up bringing people on as soon as you got
Patrick Curry was their advisor when he was back here in
every company is going to do one that didn't do that originally. Everyone's driving line here.
What kind of program?
There's a game with the best intentions of this. And,
actual engineering has been more like
and some of that stuff, you know, how did that happen?
I think I recently started teaching myself
Launch issues aside, I'm here with a lot of major corporate corporates.
If you want to get everything together, like GitHub or whatever, polish up your resume, and then come to Portfolio Posse and just sign up on their website. Yeah, bring your portfolio and resume, get 15 minutes to one-on-one with a modified people. Tell you real things.
The problem with the
That is the Twitter account, and I get you every Sunday. You want to look at that, you can always
I'm not even an insider by any stretch of the imagination. When I read the season, there wasn't a clear definition of what they were trying to accomplish. There was just a lot of sizzle. Marketing anyway, which is funny. Right.
too, like, I used to go to the same game for 8 days, but those are everything out.
Well, everyone has different specialties, and I don't want to make people more. I don't want to make programming.
I say that a lot. It's like, when you ask, like, why
You're good at it, and you like to anyway.
and you can ask
But
about it,
usually what they program, talking about the things beyond.
then let's just get that done.
Let's
do the elevator, get that done.
How do you iterate a project? How do you take Are you precious about your work? Those are the kinds of things that make it easy or difficult to evaluate. Those are the kind of things that are difficult to teach in some as well. They really come from experience. And understand that there are going to be things that in your head work perfectly well, but they might touch something that was perceived that you had no knowledge of. But that does mean you're going to have to go back and do some work.
Destiny 1 is still better.
Yeah, I mean, that's
It
fine.
got
I
better.
never
It got
played
better after the
Destiny
first
2, I only played
It
Destiny.
can be the death
Good
of
for you.
If
If you ever
you
want
can
to
tolerate it at some
take
level, more
it,
importantly,
they fix a lot of the issues that Destiny 2 had. They give us back machine guns. All the things they give us back, they gave us back to them.
Yes, I am, yep. Right as Anthem was shifting the song, I decided to. It wasn't because I knew anything like that was gonna happen, but I was at a point where it felt like a good time to try a startup, and I've never done that, and I really trusted and respected the guys and them. So,
the truth is, a lot of times
I wanted
in
to
the interview process,
do it, and I knew
it's
that
about how you
it was
deal with
kind of
stressful
like, go
situations.
now or you're not.
It's about how you think abstractly when given something that you weren't.
I could never do that.
expected.
I mean, not unless I had.
I mean, yeah, you do need, if you got to an interview process, that means that.
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard. I'm surprised
That
by how hard it is.
point, it's really about
Because I always thought that was going to be harder than
it's going to be an average.
That might be, that might not be true.
You got there after they lost the fashion
It's a point where you don't just, decisions based on.
I read about that thing with the wives of the programmers almost.
Stay focused on what's most
That was a long time ago.
based on how they're.
Microsoft is why you can't have the contractor on more than a year.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing, yes. I know, I mean, I remember one time I went to my car and there was really that guy parked next to me in the
In a
garage.
workplace environment, you'd have access to the internet and references, and you'd be able to look it up and give something else. But there are some people that, a lot of times, the way to determine whether someone may be a problem child is whether they think they know absolutely everything about it. The truth is, you need to learn how to know a lot about a little about a lot.
I actually just let those as arcades and just recently left my own startup. That's
And knowing that to some extent, there's always going to be things you don't know.
Yes, yes.
And a lot of times it's not what you know, it's about
This
how
is
you
one of
apply
our
it.
first,
Again, these are things that are difficult for someone to figure out. The truth is, you're trying to make the most out of the time that you're spending.
different.
Trying to qualify
What a big reason why I just kind of get tired of
tolerate having you around. And they depend on you. That's really what it is. It's an imperfect process, but you just need to find a way to keep yourself trying to keep because it becomes unfair and awkward. Then you're it's unfair, but whatever. You can't make it. You need to focus on your own
Where's the
the very top. You got my
great experiences, take the good things from it. That's the key. Take the good things, the bad things, and you build on it and just keep going. And that's what makes you better. You're passionate about games, and you're not a 9 to 5. We might not be sleeping in our cars, but anybody who is getting a 9 to 5, you gotta be passionate. You gotta follow it.
I think great time to have. But there's obviously more people who want to talk to you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you can make your way back to your seats. We got a little more time, and obviously lots more people want to talk to Dennis soon.
white.
Yeah,
Anyway, want to give an acknowledgement. I did at the very beginning of this, but neither of them were here. But both the reps from Electric Hat Games, Richard and Dan, are here. Thanks, guys, for paying for our food and drink tonight. Good luck on your next project. I'm sure we'll hear more about it soon. Who has more questions for Debbie Sue?
Yes.
Actually, I have a bit of a question, kind of marketing as well. There's a bit of a setup. So Apex Legends comes out. It's this really fun battle royale game. Has a really tight gameplay loop, but there's obviously a lot of bugs, and it's in need of additional content after not that long. And then, from my perspective, they fail to deliver on the new content, and they slowly patch their bugs, which I think is fine. Like from my perspective, patching the bugs is just if they take their time and get that done, that's great. I'm happy. But they really took a long time on new content, and you could see the ratings for their content really dipped, right? And the place grade, and a lot of people really upset with the game.
Yeah.
So what's your perspective on that as like a marketing person?
Well,
How do you analyze that?
I would say it's always hard for everybody, not just marketing, if the game is struggling in any capacity. It could be just getting people in the door, on launch day. That sucks. I've been part of like a couple of those, and I can tell you people are not sleeping, not leaving the building, in a war room, literally feeling horrible that anybody is going through any of that. And every single person who can talk and move hands is in and doing something. And so no team, I think everyone gets it, but it's never something that you want to have happen. It's never something that you think is going to happen. Like Anthem didn't think that was going to happen either. They just woefully underestimated some technology type stuff. But, so number one, I always feel that, and I think a lot of people who have been in that trench before say prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And even with EA at that time, they had identified like auxiliary bandwidth, if you will. They just didn't recognize the need to get it in and working and done fast enough, and it became a problem. But you have to start planning for, that's a friction point, right? So when you're thinking about launching the game and you know that your company is going to invest wholeheartedly in it, which I would guess they had that plan of putting, those really big streamers out there because they kept it very under the radar. And you say, look, we better have like the bandwidth that ate Cincinnati. Like, I don't know what that is, but battle royales are humongous. That team that made that game is well respected and well known to do really great stuff. And they have a big fan base, and then you throw the #1 streamer at it. So that's a big mistake in upfront planning. And how do I feel about it as a marketing person? I feel very disappointed in my company when that happens. I feel like there's enough of those that have already happened. There's enough of those in this entire business to never have another one. And a company like EA should plan for the biggest bang. And the other thing, and this comes more from the Anthem experience, is that the people coming in day one are who? They're the people that bought the $120 pack, who got every, special suit you could get and all that stuff and the early access. They are your most committed players. They are your most committed customers. If you don't roll out a red carpet for them, you have missed a super big moment in your ability to do what we've been talking about tonight. To build that relationship with players starting day one so that they stay with you and they're damn proud to be that first guy that was in the door, and they're bragging about it all over social and streaming it. So that's a big miss, and it's disappointing. I mean, I can't lie. It's disappointing. It's disappointing for an EA because, they're big enough and smart enough. But obviously they were surprised. My guess is they were really even surprised by their own estimates. And I know only one thing to be true, no one wants that to happen. No one in the entire company wants it to happen.
I have a question. Do you have like any favorite games or examples that you thought of a game that did a really good job of leveraging marketing to the point where you thought it was like even worth studying?
There's some really great examples. Halo's done some really great marketing things. Like they're a brand that we always looked at on the marketing team. Like they do a lot of the beats leading up to launch, and they just hit the right moment, hit the right video. You know, I thought Battlefront did a really great job, Battlefront 1, with that initial launch. Like they had, we had this like ship thing that you could get in at all the events, and it was like a virtual, like you were in the ship having a fight and you got your picture taken in it, and some of the best footage, best moments with key characters was able to be shown, and some of it played hands-on early on in the cycle. So people who were able to come to events, or do this EA Play thing, which is like a hands-on during E3, they were able to then socialize it, right, and be the influencers for it. And they did a lot of great things with bringing influencers in throughout the process and really let them share. So I thought that was good. I'm trying to think of some other really good ones.
Were they flying the influencers then, or just like
Yep.
inviting? Okay.
And then I thought Destiny, actually the original Destiny, like I remember when those guys came out, like God, what, 6 years before the game shipped, and they're like, we're gonna make this game, and it's gonna be like an 8-year game, and there's gonna be all these worlds, and I was like, wow, that's some good PR right there. I mean, they kicked it off with nothing but concept art and a vision, but they were able to capture everybody's imagination. And they pretty much lived up to the promise too when it shipped. I mean, it was a really great game and it was awesome. I mean, I think that was another great one that I remember standing out. But Halo's for sure. I'm trying to think of what else, because there's a lot of good ones.
Destiny also had good community engagement. Like,
Yeah.
I was always, like, I met Deej at E3, and
Yeah.
it was just incredible.
They did. They had it going. Like they had great PR, great marketing, great community. They had the trifecta. And it wasn't.
And a great brand.
Yeah.
Bungie's a great brand.
Yeah, and it didn't feel over the top, even though arguably, I remember that first PR event, and I remember thinking, oh my God, this is so over the top, they're never gonna do all that, you know? But they had a vision, and it's something that players want. They had a long life vision for their game, and they were telling people up front, hey, you're gonna come in this game, and you can spend 6 or 8 years in here. And that's an important message to get out for that kind of game. Yep.
Hi, so you mentioned Halo and it made me think about something that's sort of related to marketing. I remember Halo 3 in particular had this really cool ARG that they did, and it personally, was that?
It was Halo 2, not
Halo 2, well actually, the one after that, Halo 3, they did one for that too.
Yeah.
I didn't play back in Halo 2, so I wasn't around for that, but for Halo 3, they did one that personally got me really involved, and they've kind of done a little bit of that since then with something like Hunt the Truth, if any of y'all know what that is, the podcast style thing.
Mhm.
So I'm curious what role marketing or you personally have played in any sort of more underground marketing sort of things like ARGs, like.
I've done an ARG. I did
Yeah.
an ARG for a game, and it was really fun. I did something for a game that, let's see how we did this. The premise of the game was, there was a movie, and I can't think of the name of it, that was kind of like this, but it's kind of like you're, let's say, a teen, and you're kind of realizing that suddenly you've got these powers, right? You're kind of waking up to the fact that you're not like everybody else. And we were preparing to surprise reveal the game at a big event. And so we did this thing where we had like the 4 teens. We did a movie with each one, a really short video that was like, one of them was like somebody was at their house and they had a fight with their parents and they went outside and just like, they were able to basically destroy like the trees and the yard, and it was just like starting to manifest and they were getting it under control, and it's like, what the hell's happening? And then another teen was like in a, like it was like a diner-ish setting. So we had these vignettes we made them, it's like, hey, you're manifesting these powers, what's gonna happen next? And we created a website. We created a website not on our brand because we didn't want anyone to know what it was, right? So we created this separate independent website where those emails led you to. So you got the video through the email, and then it went to say, and I forget, it was like a cool tagline, like, you know, what's happening, what do you do when? And so everybody went to this website when they got these emails. They figured out somehow what company it came from. I think it was because of like the stuff on the bottom of the email, and crashed this website. Just, it crashed. It crashed because so many people hit it at one time, and it went crazy. It went way over the top. And it was that whole idea of like this underground thing, what's happening, why is it happening? And we had on this website like posts that we had made like of other people, and we're all coming together at this site, what's happening? And then it was like tune in at Gamescom, you know, to find out. But the website crashed, and at like 6 a.m. in Germany, I got a call from like the VP of the brand, and he's like, hey, what's going on right now with the website? It was just like the emails hit and the website just was like melting, and all like across, like in different places, everybody was mobilizing to help the company that we had contracted with, and we had to go out and get like all this extra server bandwidth, you know, that you can lease from places, and literally in like 2 hours we had to fix this whole thing. But so we did do that, and it worked so well that it crashed the website, which is the learning there was, you know, we wanted to work with a third party so that it wasn't traceable back to the company, because we wanted it to be kind of surprising, but that was probably not a good idea, because we could have planned internally to support it a lot better.
And I did have one other question about that. So when it came to designing the actual ARG and stuff, did you guys mainly handle that? Did you outsource it? Did you get people that were working on the game?
So in that case, the dev guys had a lot, they had the idea of, you know, this kind of way the game would work, and then we brainstormed the whole idea of like this idea of it manifesting and what happens, and that kind of thing. And then we hired an agency to help us make the videos that went out that had like, you know, just the right people that really fit the vision. So we did it together as a team. Marketing owned a lot of like the executional stuff, but the dev team really had a lot of the great vision and ideas, and we all kind of worked together on it. And then the agency helped us, you know, really polish and tune it with the videos. But we all worked together. We did a lot of stuff where we'd get the team in the beginning, you know, we'd sit down and say, what does this brand want to be? How's it different? You know, like we did a lot of things together that allowed us to understand the vision in the same way. Because we spent a lot of time then up front thinking about the brand personality, the USPs, the core loop, and not only from a development standpoint, but from a marketing standpoint. Like what hooks could we put into it? How do we make a unique PR event? What carries, you know, people through from one thing to the next thing if they're signing up? So that was really something neat that we did a lot at that point in time, and it had nothing to do with tactics. It was really more about strategy. We worked together on what we called the brand truth. Like, what's the one thing you could say about this game that you could not say about any other game? You know, and really getting to that thing.
Magic.
Let's make this the last question. You decide.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, what are some of the things you've seen devs do, or you think they can do to further empower the marketing team?
I think, you know, bringing marketing in early in the cycle, like early. The minute you say, hey, we're gonna do a game, bring the marketing team in like Google's doing. I also think understanding more about the marketing process, like I'm always telling people things like, hey, if the video opens and it's your logo, we're all dead, like, cause people are gone. The average time that people watch a video on YouTube is 6 seconds. If 3 of that is your logo animation, like they're gone. And I'm always saying, look, the first 3 seconds, the first 6 seconds, it's gotta be like super engaging. And then hit logo, like 6 seconds in, right? So those are, I just literally said that today on a thread when we were talking about something. And those are things that, you know, dev teams aren't in touch with all the time and don't realize. Key art, like for that game I was just talking about, we obviously worked hard to create these characters that were part of the key art. And they represented those 4 different types of magic that we were gonna bring forward, right? And the way we built that key art, we built it so that we could use it in small shots, you know, and bigger things, and poster things, and animated things, and, you know, we thought about how we could slice and dice that art 100 ways from Sunday, so we wouldn't have to keep trying to make new art. And so that you have one brand identity, and you have one brand image, and there might be 4 images, but they're intimately related, and you can use them separately and then bring them together as the key art. And today, like, we're looking at that, where I am now, and we're saying, hey, we have this great cinematic video, can we pull images from that? And then the video, the imagery, the key art, everything is true to the game, and it's one brand identity, wherever we are and whatever we need. So we're looking at how do we make it one thing, and not like every piece of concept art or everything. Those all have a place, but you wanna be able to leverage your identity these days across so many different channels and mediums.
So you're kind of that first barrier in telling them how it's gonna come across to customers, cause you're still customer.
Yeah, and how we wanna repurpose things so that we're being really efficient with how we're spending money and with the development time. And then we talk about like the new player experience and paying off on things for the brand early in that new player experience that make it, oh, this is cool, you know, oh, I saw that in that key art, that there was something there, and now here it is, you know, so even in the new player experience, bringing forward the promise that you made in the marketing, or in the key art, or in the video, or whatever it may be.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Give yourselves